So you didn't, the original sin aspect, you didn't think it was valid?
It could not be valid from my perspective because we're the image and likeness of God, and God couldn't make mistakes. So I considered that, but from my perspective, if I would utilize choice as my reason for sin, then I am simply choosing not to be the image and likeness of God, which is then, a fallacy in itself, because I'm making a deliberate choice of something that I know to be a denial of my true nature, according to the scriptures, to be the image and likeness of God. Mm-hmm. So I pushed the point of the image and likeness of God. I studied more and more. I did a lot of reading. I went to various circle development groups, meditation groups. I started investigating psychics to find out if there is anything valuable or valid about it. I had my father-in-law as a deep trance medium. He could do bilocation, he could indicate events that would happen later on by reading, by simply sitting it here and bringing the event forward to himself as if time would be folded, and then say what will happen. And to such a degree that 50% of the times it did happen. 50% of the times it didn't. So that confused me a little bit, because why didn't it? What was fascinating about the deep trance medium was that there was a doorkeeper. The doorkeeper was always the one that would speak first and that would allow the others through. So it was very clear that there was some form of discipline. And in some instances, beings from the afterlife would come through and speak, specifically trying to give messages through to their family that they are not dead. But they were then quickly removed from the medium, and then the doorkeeper would say, sorry, they were not supposed to speak. They're supposed to stand in line and wait their chance, but they never got a chance to speak. At that stage I was obviously already reading a lot of the channelings from angels, archangels, the Michael teachings. I studied many of the various teachings, Ramallah, Seth, all kinds of, and I found a lot of things in there that made sense. Read the Palladian Agenda, and all the meantime looking at meditation and understanding what is the point of us being here, because seemingly I found a fascinating thing is that psychics and mediums can normally never help themselves, so they can help other people, but their lives are normally in a mess. And you could see it especially when you start to get closer to them, that during the times when they are spreading the word, the message, they are one person. The moment that is no longer what they are doing, they would become immediately just a normal person with normal shit, gossiping and doing all the stuff that would be seen as normal human social behavior, which was a contradiction to the message they were giving, which was, I found that very curious, because it is as if they were living two lives. To me that didn't make sense, because you either live something or you don't. But what was very clear for me at that stage is that obviously I interpreted it that God is testing us in multiple ways, and that in essence it is about our intent in our actions. I had a fortunate experience after studying, is that I became a policeman. 4.5 years I was in the police force, trained in crowd control. I was a fraud detective, and I saw something there that was quite disheartening. I studied law, and I realized during my time in the police that there was no law, that there was no protection to the average man in any way whatsoever, and that there are people that are deliberately virtually evil.
Now, how did that realization just creep up on you? Was it a gradual process?
It was gradually, as I was working with people, and I had always a notion I would discuss things with even the criminal to understand their behavior, their reason why. And mostly they were either addicted to drugs, or they are greedy, they want a lot of money, or they're in financial trouble. Violence mostly came from alcohol, which was the experience while I was in the police in terms of the cases we were dealing with. There was also groups that would work together that has deliberately taken on society as a form of a gang to generate income and to specifically target the gullibility of the average human being. And they would get away with it because the average human being is truly gullible and have no notion that they could be deliberately deceived in their face. And therefore they would deliberately deceive in the face. But during that time in the police, I met a lady which was a psychometrist. We used psychometry, and I tested psychometry extensively and found a few interesting points where, for instance, that if one used a photograph to do psychometric reading, the more photographs of the same person you put together, the stronger the signal would be, the more information we're able to get out. And we looked at that information, and I tested it by actually following it up. Some cases it was so, some cases it wasn't. What seemed to be very clear was that the person reading the information had a definitive impact on what information would come through and how they interpret it. And therefore it is quite a difficult thing, and that it seems that there was some kind of barrier. You could only get certain information. Up to that stage, at no time, and I had then sessions with my father-in-law as medium several times a week. So I was fortunate I had my own full-time deep trance medium. In the beginning, he could not trance without the generation of energy. We used a church organ sound, the organ sounds of church music to generate energy. Then the beings will come through to talk, the people from the afterlife, one after the other, and we would record the sessions, and for about an hour they can continue, and then the energy would drop, and they would say the energy is dropping. Eventually what they said normally is you need quite a number of people in a group together that talks the whole time to generate vibrations so that the beings can actually speak through the body. Now in a deep trance medium, for instance, when the being comes through, the person who's in the body actually disappears. They do not remember a thing. With one event I learned something fascinating, because at one stage my father-in-law wanted to die. He tried to get out of the body, and I was instructed how to bring him back into the body and what they call pull him back. And it was very clear that he was outside his body and that they had to get him back inside his body. So from that perspective, I understood that it was possible to leave the body. I didn't really understand at that stage the impact of that particular event, but I did as they showed me what to do, and I pulled him back into the body. His wife was there as well, she was with, and the two of us together pulled him back in the body, and he was very angry because he wanted to die. He wanted to leave the body, and he said to me, "You cannot trust anyone in heaven." He says, "You can trust no one." To me that was like strange. I did not believe him. I thought he was simply just angry because he had to do things in the war that he felt heaven should never have put in front of his door. And he blamed heaven for those choices he had to make. And so from my perspective he was simply angry, and that his form of revenge was directed at the spirit world for what happened in the Second World War. Because in the Second World War he had to make a choice between two friends of different sides of the war, and he had to kill one of them to protect his men. And he had to slit the throat of the being because it was in the danger zone behind the lines, so he was absolutely disgusted with having to do that. So in the exposure, obviously now with discussing with many beings, some 100 that's been on earth hundreds of years ago, and then they would discuss their existence. One being that came through a lot was Kaiser Wilhelm von Hohenzollern from Bayern. He came through, we had many discussions with various beings. None of the discussions though ever would be awfully spiritual, although some would come through and pray. For instance, Paul Kruger used to be the president of the Union of the Transvaal a long time ago, would come and pray for his people, and they would talk about God as the white light, in whose face you cannot stand, you cannot face it, the light is too bright. So I was intrigued by that because the God was depicted as the light.
Have you ever heard of the God as a white light? Or the white light?
Never particularly, although yes, there is mentionings of that in the Bible, God as light. I studied the Bible quite extensively. So by the time I finished in the police, I've had 4.5 years of regular channelings, on average about an hour and a half at a time. I've seen various phenomena, for instance, where with a single movement a cat would become without any life force, the cat would turn like into a fur that they would place over my arm, and it will fold over my arm. There was a particular fear about cats, so they wanted cats not to be close to the deep trance medium. They said it interferes with the ectoplasm. There was also a point of light. The channel couldn't bear bright light at all. So it had to be done in semi-darkness. Bright light would cause extensive pain to the body. Also, meat was not allowed to be eaten. Being eaten meat, they will throw up. And obviously my father-in-law deliberately tried to eat meat to try and stop the gift or the skill or the ability to channel. But he was a healer, so...
Did he have a specific group that that sort of constellated around him?
Nothing. He did not want to have anything to do with it. After his studies, he did not form any groups. Nobody came to him. He did no readings for anyone. He was basically just a healer that do healing using homeopathy. When I came on the scene, it seemed to have activated all of those things again. If I have a headache, for instance, I'll go to him and then he put his hands on me to take the headache away. He could do shit like that. He would go into trance. They demonstrated, for instance, for cataleptic paralysis, where the body turns into a statue. So you're standing there like a statue, you can't move it, which is fascinating. Moving things like closing doors, opening doors, using ectoplasm. They basically use ectoplasm for that. The ectoplasm, what was explained to me is that ectoplasm was not in the same quantity in all bodies. Some people carry more ectoplasm and they become deep trance mediums. He was born with the ability. It was not something that he was trained in. He predicted the abdication of the King of England many, many years ago when that happened as a child, and therefore because that happened, that prediction, they called him the prophet. Because he made predictions that, for instance, like that then happens. So I was in a way disheartened and in a way not. I was very interested in finding a solution to the world. How, to me, what was quite fascinating is that heaven on earth couldn't just happen. It was something we had to practically participate in for it to become real. That was what has become clear to me as I was studying the scriptures. And obviously in discussion with the afterlife, these things were kind of sidestepped. They never talked about it. And they never would answer questions clearly that's related to anything about the spirit world. It was as if that was a topic that was not allowed to be discussed. So from there I was involved in investigating various things involving fraud at the level of money. And I was warned by the spirit world that that is something not to investigate, because you would be killed if you do. So when all of these things started going haywire, I decided to stop and leave, and I moved to Durban.
And where were you previously?
I was in Johannesburg. I was at the biggest police station in the country. I was stationed there. So I then was in Durban and primarily had to make a living. We started going into education. To me, education was the key, and to assist people. For 7 years I worked in mathematics, because to me, as I could see, if one has got a reasonable mathematical ability, your ability to work out a living answer, something that, a contextual answer within your living expression, would be enhanced. But I found that it was limited. People seem to forget something. It's as if it never becomes real. You study at school, and then after school, everything you've learned at school just disappears again. The only things that remained was, for instance, your tables, your basic bonds, and so on. Things that you have learned parrot fashion, off by heart, those things remained. Things that you studied as knowledge that you didn't take to the parrot fashion form, you tend to forget. So that was a curious observation, because it would indicate that if you have a better memory ability, you seem to have been able to do better in the world. In investigating that, I became aware that our reading ability was really atrocious. So I was fortunate that I was identified with such a problem when I was about 18 years old. I did courses to enhance my reading ability, and that changed my life, because that placed me in a position to observe information independently, meaning without preconceived ideas. You first read the information, look at it without your belief system, without emotional influence, without your preconceived definitions, because that influenced the outcome of the information, and then you look at it, which allowed me to be more critical about what I'm reading in terms of whether it is practically real, practical, sustainable, practical support. Slowly but surely that ability started to influence what I have accepted as real. It was very clear that the message from the Bible was a peculiar message, strange message, that was full of contradictions. And so I decided, due to my exposure with the medium, that obviously there is definitely an afterlife there. I had no doubt about anymore, because I had many conversations and many points that were shown that very clearly indicated that an afterlife existed. So in my investigation with psychics, I went to as many as possible, wherever I could find, and I went there and simply just listened to compare the various readings between psychics. I never had, from all the, and I've been to many psychic sessions, besides my father-in-law, probably an extra 100 sessions that I did over years. And never was two messages the same in any way whatsoever. Or could anyone pick up that I've been to other psychics? And I had strange experiences where things would be predicted that would happen, and then it would happen, and then, but I had an interesting notion with that. I looked at it that I am not obliged to follow that, so therefore I would sometimes deliberately stop and not follow it, which made the psychics very angry, because they said, this is a message from God, from the spirit world, and I must adhere to it. I simply said, I'm not willing to do that. I mean, I have free choice as far as I was concerned at that stage. And suddenly, from their perspective, I didn't. So I found the whole free choice thing early on challenged, even by the beings from the spirit world. So initially there was no big motions. I did my thing. I studied the Cryon channelings. I studied conversations with God extensively, the Pleiadians, Michael's teachings, the Book of Miracles. What is that?
Course of Miracles.
Course of Miracles. Many books. I had my own library, extensive. Joel Goldsmith, The Infinite Way, the Saint-Germain writings, all of those, and I would, Melchizedek.
Okay. Trimbala.
Yeah, I would go into it intensely. I would intensely study it. I would, for instance, read the book, I will have it on tape, I will listen to it over and over and over again, I will test it out, I will live it to see how effective it is, and if there is any value as a living support for myself in this world, which I can demonstrate through example to others. To me, the principle was that one must find a way to be an example at that stage. In that, I kept on developing software for reading abilities. There was many setbacks, but I stuck to the point of what it is I really wanted to do. To me, it was never about the money. It was finding a way to support people effectively, even if they don't understand that such a point is available. To find a way, to me, was the more children I could help to read effectively, to have an effective vocabulary, the more their chances to actually develop their own worldview independently of the influences that exist that is limiting our reality. So I applied it with my own children, and that was quite effective. I developed a strong independence, effective critical assessment of points, and very assertive expression. Therefore, they were not easily influenced. To me, obviously, the point that existed above all points was love. Love was the ultimate point. In all of that, I studied also the work of Alice Bailey, did the esoteric healing courses, had some interesting experiences that started to change my perspective while studying Alice Bailey. And I started to consider that there is a definite technology involved within the spirit world. And Alice Bailey's work very clearly indicate the technology, and when I applied it, I had experiences that indicate that it actually had an impact on the reality as we perceive it. In that, I ended up eventually in a dire straits financially and in divorce. After the divorce, I made a decision, discussed it with the ex-wife, and this decision was very specific, that we must forgive each other, we must get together, sit down, forgive each other, because forgiveness to me was a very valuable, powerful message. Forgive each other for everything that we've ever done to each other, so that we can have a proper relationship to support the children. Which we did. We sat down one evening and we face to face would, openly discuss everything we've done and did forgiveness. That continued for about 8 hours. It was very explosive, extremely emotional. It was, in that I experienced an interesting thing. In applying forgiveness, I'm feeling somehow lighter. It's like a burden that's lifted. I decided to go full out. Like I've always done with this stuff, I go full out and test it out, no matter what. I decided to do it full out, and I did do it full out. And by the end of the first 8-hour session, I was able to perceive things that I've never thought possible. I could perceive virtually another reality right here where we are. And I could experience what was happening within other people. And the more we did forgiveness together, those that would participate in the same group of forgiveness would tend to be able to pick up each other's thoughts and experiences directly. And I found it fascinating that it was showing in the physical body. So I started exploring that and investigating that. I did a lot of reading on that in terms of Louise Hay, Brandon Bayes, all kinds of beings that dealt with forgiveness, studying forgiveness, testing it. At that stage I was already doing kinesiology from the perspective of finding within me what is me really, what is self-honesty, what is it, why do I have experiences there where I have one intent, but I will do something differently to what I intend to do. So that didn't make sense, that in the last moment, no matter how good my intent, I will end up doing something else. It's as if you are compelled to protect yourself against some unseen possible point of somebody hurting or harming you. So therefore you might have the greatest intent, you will always act in self-protection in the end. And in the points, fascinatingly enough, where you did push through in your intent, those that notice that you are doing that will deliberately abuse you. So you had this catch-22 where you simplistically could not get past the point of the strangest of abuses that existed. You can profess to be a good person, but when it comes to the self-interest point, to the point of self-protection, you will always regard yourself first and disregard everything else. And you'll justify it. So justification became a very clear point that I realized was causing me quite a lot of uncomfortableness within. I mean, I can justify something, but to, in the end, live with it, I found that very difficult, because it's as if I became weaker if I would allow any point of me acting in opposition to my intent and actually acting in self-interest. So I started forcing myself to deliberately push through the points, to apply my forgiveness, to make sure I don't justify and go through it no matter what happens, even to the point of my own destruction. And I kept on pushing. Within that, I ended up destroying myself. Ended up with nothing. And that's where I started again, and in that point where I started again, I looked again at reading, and I developed programs, and then I met a man, Rob, that was into video recordings, and he was curious about what we were doing, and I said, look, we're doing a reading project in terms of finding ways to present ways to assist children to be effective readers and have an impact on that, with that on the world. Although obviously our ideas or intent were pretty good, the practical application of that was a different story. They then wanted to do a recording about, talking about the reading project, and they were doing real-time TV, and they said they will pop in one evening and come and do a shoot. And one evening at about 9 o'clock, they were there with lights and cameras, and at the door and in, and it was cameras running. I mean, this is a real-time story. We were in the lounge, and we were talking, and I was showing them what it was all about, and we ended up talking a little bit about forgiveness and how forgiveness operates. And while talking about forgiveness, the next moment one of the cameramen walked onto set and came and sit in front of me and started challenging me about forgiveness in the Bible specifically, and how I could claim that forgiveness is so valuable. And I suggested to him a simple thing. I said to him, just say with me, let's do forgiveness together. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself not to love myself unconditionally. It's a simple thing. And he looked at me, and I could see it is at the tip of his tongue, but he just couldn't speak, so I kept on repeating it, and I took his hand. And as I took his hand, his whole body contracted, like his hand turned into claws, his eyes popped over to white, and he was like unable to speak at all, and his face was contracted, and it was very clear that he had some kind of an event which I did not immediately recognize as anything. To me it could be a seizure, it could be anything. I just kept on holding him and doing forgiveness. And it's only towards the end that I realized, but there is something inside him that is causing this. Suddenly that something left, and actually left the house, and at that moment he was back, aware fully, immediately as the thing left, and he ran out of the house, and he came back, and he says all that he remembered is that a blackness came over him, and that only when that blackness was out of him was he back aware. So in the meantime, obviously the cameras were running. To me that was a little bit disheartening, because I have now experienced a form of a possession, but that left the person and actually went hunting or looking for another host. So in effect I have caused more harm than good from my perspective, because whatever it was at that stage was still loose. And I started studying, and I looked at Jesus, for instance, that drove out the evil spirits into the pigs, and the pigs then into the water. I mean, even at that principle, it meant those spirits still existed and would have looked for new hosts. So that to me wasn't valid, and that made me question a lot about the Jesus message, because just in that one event was an unacceptable point. So I vowed not to ever again help a person that's possessed until I understand how this can be done without the spirit or the possession moving and looking for another host.
So did you believe in the existence of, according to the Jesus story, when his sayings about demons, when they would leave and come back with more if they found a nicely kept home?
I didn't have any belief about anything around demons. I mean, I've now had an experience of it. I've heard of it happening, but to me, I strange enough had no fear of it whatsoever. To me, it was simply something I have to understand. I did at that stage not understand anything about demons. I didn't realize. All I knew is that, to me, it was a test God placed. The ultimate test would be, the ultimate test of forgiveness, from my perspective at that stage, would be that God would place amongst us evil spirits that in essence is no different to us, because it comes from the same source, that we must face and assist them with forgiveness. So I looked at it from that perspective, that forgiveness as a gift from God, as I understood it then, was the key to assist even an evil spirit. And that would be the kind of challenge God would place in front of us before we could actually enter His kingdom. I mean, so I looked at those kind of stuff. So I looked at it and studied and tried and find out more about it. And first of all, very clearly, I practiced forgiveness to make sure that there is no fear. I used kinesiology with which I programmed myself to be able to assist demons specifically, and I started with assisting them by setting up myself, because to me I came to the conclusion is that if I cannot face a demon in me, allow me to be possessed, and I cannot face that demon in forgiveness, then obviously I'm not ready. The only way to find out if I'm ready to assist a demon is to actually take them into me. So I set myself up to take out demons automatically, no matter where I go, simply by being in the presence of the beings, or even in a shopping center, that I take the demons into me automatically. That had a repercussion that I didn't expect. One morning we woke up, and we had painting outside on the walls of the house, like I'm going to kill you and your son, crosses, and all kinds of satanic kind of symbols and so on, all on the doors around the house. I got Cerise to just come, what is going on here? And she says, we've got demons everywhere. So somehow I've pissed off the demons, because I've been taking them into me, and as I take them into me, I show them forgiveness. At that stage I've already understood quantum existence, where I can show them my total existence and what I've done with forgiveness and how I've worked with it and why I trust it and so on, and why I trust it will assist them as well. All of that when I take them into me. So at that stage I have never faced a group of demons. There was over 300 of them there, and I've never faced a group of demons like that. So I didn't know exactly what to do. So I said to Cerise, look, it's very simple. We need to get all these demons into me, and you've got to make sure we get them all. And she was quite okay with that. So I mean, she's like, okay, let's do that. So that's what we did. We did the whole lot. The last 5 was the most difficult. They were the strongest demons. But we got them all into me, and as they got into me, I just stand and show them what forgiveness is and what it's all about. And they all transformed, and then they went somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but I mean, they were no longer demons. So by this stage I was really very clear that forgiveness do actually transform the demon specifically. So therefore I made it my objective to help as many as possible. Started having meetings at home where we would specifically bring demons and specifically assist them. And I was quite comfortable to allow people to become possessed, and that seemed to happen very easily when I give permission for it, from the perspective that I'm there, so that I simplistically will show them the experience so they can understand the demon's experience, then apply forgiveness and assist the demon, and then afterwards, after the demon has done forgiveness, we will discuss their life with them and what caused them to become a demon and so on, which was fascinating beyond imagination, because all the ways that the beings has become demons was normally based on traumatic events during their life, abuse, all kinds of things, or traumatic death events caused them to become demons, and we would afterwards discuss it.
So the demon would talk as the person?
Yeah, well, after first the demon would be in the body and speak. Once the demon has done forgiveness, we do forgiveness together. Mm-hmm. Once the demon has done forgiveness, the demon will wake up, and we would discuss their life, because they're no longer a demon. They would change their right in front of us.
Wow.
I mean, many. We did this many times, in through various different bodies. Testing it. We would have sometimes 3-4 people possessed at the same time, take them through the forgivenesses, assist them. They would resist many times. They would squeal and scream and do all kinds of strange demon-like stuff. They are possessing the person. I mean, their eyes pop over. It's a normal possession. If you've looked at some possessions on TV and so on, that's the kind of stuff that happens. I was extremely assertive and stable at that stage already. I've practiced extensively to make sure that there is no fear, and to make sure, especially on one point that I realized was the critical point. There must be no point within me that I have not forgiven. If the demon could find such a point, they would attach to it, because that's all they actually did. They possessed you at the point where you have not forgiven. And we tested this by allowing each one to assist with also transforming demons, by giving them an opportunity to speak to the demon. Well, I'm now there, but somebody else that's there would speak to the demon. But the demon would simply look at them and start to point out their points where they have not applied forgiveness. He says, how dare you speak to me about forgiveness if you have not forgiven? That's what the demon said. So the demons used, and they could see quite clearly, and that would stump the person because they didn't know what to say, because the demon was talking the truth. But at the nth degree, I had to then step in and actually assist the demon, because normally people have been unable to actually assist demons because they had points within themselves where they have not forgiven. I mean, because of that, they are then unable to assist. But they were quite comfortable. So a number of people were then given the opportunity to participate within the context of assisting demons. Within that, obviously, we learned a lot about demon possession. We learned, as I said, that demon possession, or demons per se, were the result of specifically some emotional event during the physical lifetime that became obsessive. We also learned that demons transferred in curious ways, say, either through alcohol, drugs, or sex, or physical traumatic events. We also learned that there was body hoppers. That means demons that would travel through time from one body to the next with a singular mission. The demons all had singular missions. It's as if they were trapped in time within their obsession, and their obsession continuously played out. So if it was particularly revenge and anger, they would actually play out revenge and anger through hundreds of years, continuously possessing people, and then taking over people at critical moments and even committing murder. Many of the people sitting in jails today did not commit the acts that they were accused of. They were possessed when it was actually happening. So when we realized that, we obviously realized that nobody is going to easily believe all of this, because, you know, the fear of demons is so extensive, and the disregard of the power of forgiveness is more extensive. I mean, I have yet to meet Christians that actually has applied forgiveness. They speak it, but they don't live it. That's why they would not dare to take on demons with forgiveness. I would suggest that one consider it very clearly that you are not actually applying forgiveness if you are not willing to trust it, even in the face of the deepest darkness. I mean, that is what forgiveness is for. There is nobody that is beyond forgiveness, even a demon, even Satan or the devil. We face Satan and the devil with forgiveness, and they applied forgiveness. So from that perspective, my perspective of God being almighty in a way as forgiveness did stand the test of time.
But did the demons offer a different look at the spirit world, or did they report
Not
the same
initially. Initially, from my perspective, the demons, once they were clear, from my perspective, they returned to God. To me, God existed as the white light. I've had many gifts given by the white light, which I've tested, and they were real. So from my perspective, they were returning. I was living here. I had specifically disciplined myself to stick to my physical breath, because that I found was a space within myself, within my world, that I could direct with ease. I can remain self-honest, and that is a part where I can have a directive impact in whatever I'm doing. So therefore I remained within my breath. So it was only much later, after we have been doing demons assisting demons for a considerable amount of time already, something like 2 years. That before and where I've sometimes been called out to assist people, especially women which were attacked by demons that are sexually driven and that would rape them, or physically attack them. They would have a physical experience with the demon possession that's sexually based, which normally came from the husband when the husband has been sleeping around.
So you were sort of called in as an exorcist?
Yes, I would just go. But it was easy at this stage. I've been doing it so many times. I would simplistically find the demon and put it into me and then sort of assist it. I found that if you're insisting on forgiveness, because what I would insist on with the demon is that I'm willing to walk eternity with the demon and show them forgiveness if they are not willing to consider what I have to show to them. And I show them that I have done worse than they have done. I am equal in their badness, in their evil, in their darkness. I am also equal in the solution, which is forgiveness. So then I showed them that I'm willing to be their guardian for eternity with forgiveness. That in itself the demons regarded as something unusual, because nobody has ever been willing to offer their existence for a singular being to walk with them for eternity. And I could show that to them with certainty, because they could test me, meaning if you are certain about something, you're standing as it as eternity. So I would stand as eternity and show them that this is me eternally, at your service for one singular point, your forgiveness. Your letting go of that which has contained you, that which has bound you within your expression, which you call demonic. To let that go using forgiveness. So that's what I did. To me, that was no unusual point. It was simplistically common sense. That was, to me, what was implied by all the teachings of Jesus, all the teachings of forgiveness. It was implied that forgiveness is the tool that break the bonds of all limitation, darkness, whatever you want to call it. So, in that time, as we were doing the forgiveness things, the portal opened. Now, obviously, I had at that stage some serious questions I would wanted to ask God and heaven. I was fairly satisfied at that stage with proof that I've had that the reptilians existed, that they were real.
The reptilians?
Yeah, that they were real, because I've tested that already on various points.
Okay, one second. So you sort of made a shift from, the God is good, no evil, to, okay, evil exists, okay, all demons exist, okay, forgiveness helps demons, and now with reptilians.
I initially studied David Icke's work. I was not satisfied with his presentation of demons. There was simply no proof. I mean, he suddenly made a big jump of assumption about reptilians. Mm-hmm. And they were all bad. Now, obviously, me coming from a point of forgiveness, that is like the best food possible you can offer me, because from my perspective, there is no all bad. From my perspective, forgiveness is the tool. So whether this reptilians is no bad or good, or whether they're aliens or whatever they are, I'm really not interested. I've had an experience with aliens during meditation once, and a physical manifested experience which was confirmed through another person, all in the same time, without any form of communication. So it was a direct demonstration of an actual alien event.
Could you talk about that a little?
We were meditating, and I was aware of some form of craft, and the next moment I had in my hands a form of light, many colors. So I sent it to one of the people that was sitting around, and immediately the person went into a trance and started doing automatic writing, and the message said, we are from a planet far away, he knows, and pointed at me. And then continued writing, and it was Yankor, which we have interviewed. I mean, there was no way that could have been constructed. It was a direct event, immediate. No communication took place. All that happened was in writing. The point was specific. What I experienced was specifically confirmed by another person, which is how I have always worked. I want confirmation from an independent point that was not influenced in any way whatsoever. So, and that was my confirmation point. So I was quite satisfied. After that, I have been in spaceships and I have traveled the universe in them, so I've seen the universe from that perspective, which was more fascinating than the aliens, I must say. Of course, although the aliens were without form in that particular instance, they had no particular form. They were more like a free-flowing form of water. But they were able to show me on peculiar technology that they had the whole universe, and I could travel through it at a speed that is and perceive it, which is more interesting, that we can actually experience the actuality of it. But anyway, to me that was irrelevant, because the problem was on Earth. The problem got nothing to do with aliens or spaceships and so on. To me that was irrelevant, because they could make no difference. Commonsensically speaking, even if the aliens come today, that will not change the human being and their basic behavior. It will not change the fears that is consistent within the human being. It will not change how the human being live. It will not change how the human being work. It will not change the family structure. It will not change anything that is currently existing on Earth, because that is what the human being is. So aliens, it was very clear to me, will never actually come to Earth. I didn't at that stage obviously understand what aliens really was and how it worked interdimensionally. I had no idea of these things. To me, I had these events, and I clearly decided that they are not there to influence me in terms of my basic understanding, which is the principle of here as breath, applying forgiveness, living as forgiveness. And obviously within that, purifying my words. At that stage I could already see words multidimensionally in sound. That happened when I was about 35 years old, so I could hear within a person's words their total life as it unfolds in sound, because in essence our existence was sound. I didn't fully comprehend the explanations of these things yet, but I have already proven its existence clearly to myself, and I have tested it out in terms of how it manifests within the physical body as pain, and how we create our reality, which is obviously a whole total discussion. Anyway, at this stage we've had many different events. We had, for instance, an event where Cerise was going out with a chap with the name James. His father died in a car crash. They went to the funeral and everything. 3 weeks after that event, we were busy working with demons. Suddenly the father was in the portal. Well, that's that the portal was already opened. And how did I know it was real? It was real because there was something going on between Cerise and James that I was not aware of. And Kiran, we did interviews with Kiran. Kiran immediately said to me, "Wait, you don't know what's going on here, let me handle it." And he handled the situation, which was where Cerise faced her point of forgiveness. Because in the face of her worst nightmares, she had to forgive, and she did. Which was fascinating. At that point, she transcended forgiveness to the ultimate degree. And when Kiran was done with that, he asked a simple question. He says, "Now, what now? Who's going to show me what's going on?" So I showed him, and that stage, I could show the breath of being everything with a single touch. So a demon, I would simplistically touch them on the oneness connection, and they will understand everything immediately. They will change, apply forgiveness, the whole story. We learned about quantum time in the most fascinating way, because now we're in a quantum reality. Eventually that was taken to sound, where a single word would express the quantum, the multidimensional quantum reality, which is timeless, which is all here, which immediately, within which the demon would understand everything and apply forgiveness, imagine, all in a single breath.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That obviously took time before we got to that point. Initially, the longest point we had was 45 minutes with a single demon, which was Patrick. We've done some interviews with Patrick. There was another demon with the name Bill. And he came through and he said to me, I know what you're doing. You're using the law of resistance, and I will not resist you. So I said to him, that's wonderful of you not resisting me, which allows me to embrace you, and therefore I embrace you. And therefore, in that moment he was fucked. So basically what I did, I used the law of resistance. The principle was simplistic. The demons that would come through would resist you. I would not resist them. I'll just open up, and as they resist, have a look at the fascinating nature of resistance. Resistance is a pushing. As you push, if there is no resistance coming back, you go in. So using the law of resistance like that allowed me to show the demons what was going on, and they could not resist me from that perspective because it was futile. So that showed another perspective, because I had a single moment in which to come up with how to deal with this point of this clever demon. I mean, the demon telling me he's not going to resist me. So that
worked both ways.
Yeah, so it works both ways, which was fascinating, because it works both ways. Because basically the principle that I understood at that stage was that there was a singular law within consciousness, which is also within the physical manifested universe, which is the law of balance. Now, the law of resistance is simply a derivative of that, because all things are always pushing away from each other in equilibrium, which is the law of balance. Therefore, everything is always in equilibrium. If you want to change anything, you have to step beyond the equilibrium, either allowing it into you or pushing it, and then allowing it into you. You have to basically embrace what is here to change it. You have to step beyond the balance. You have to become virtually, you can call it the point of change. You have to become the catalyst. If you are not the catalyst, therefore if you do not interfere, there will be no change. That was very clearly demonstrated in dealing with the demons from this perspective. So at this stage, we've now, with the opening of the portal, that gave us quite a new perspective on anything, because we've been dealing with demons, and then I was sitting discussing with people at the point that we're going to need to have a direct access to heaven to investigate what is going on, why demons, for instance, exist, because here we have proven that forgiveness changed demons. I would like to know from heaven, why have they not applied forgiveness with the demons? I mean, that's the message from heaven. Here we have proven in this world, in the physical, that forgiveness worked with demons, and heaven is not applying forgiveness. I would like to know why. So I need somebody, I'll show them how, willing to go into heaven and find out what the fuck is going on. And so Únete said, yes, she'll do it. So I looked at it, and at that moment that she said it, I tested it. I test those things inside me in terms of and it stood. So I was a little bit unsure from the perspective because I didn't know what she will face. Will she be strong enough to stand? The only tool she has is forgiveness. Whatever is going to happen, she's going to have to use forgiveness, which is strange, isn't it? And I then said, okay, there's only one thing I can do for you. I can protect you. I can protect you with the grace of God. Which means what I then did is I placed my arms on the shoulders and I placed myself as a protection. Because at that stage I understood one thing very clearly. We are the image and likeness of God. That means we are equal in one. Therefore we are the directive principle of creation. Therefore if I place me, I'm placing everything here as the absolute directive principle. And that singular moment, she breathed and left the body. So, and then she started coming back, obviously, with many stories of all the things, and she was bringing back beings, and she said, I met this being, and I met this one, and oh, this is a demon, and then we'll bring this, and it's just a lot of things were happening. We were very busy. Had a chat with, obviously, I've studied Osho extensively, so Osho was always, I wanted to talk to Osho because I've always had a level of respect for what he was doing and what he was writing, so I wanted to hear from him if he can give us, shed some light on what the fuck is going on. So I was speaking to Osho, and then we had the Jesus event. The Jesus event was fascinating because I wasn't quite sure with all the books written in this world if Jesus really exists or not. But and my children was never in church. They were never exposed to the Bible. They were never exposed to Jesus. Nothing. So Leslie John came into the room and he said to me, and now remember, Leslie John has never been in church. He's not been baptized. He's never read the Bible. He knows nothing of all these things. That was never part of his existence, because before he was born, I have already given up on, I have already followed a path from my perspective, which was forgiveness and the image and likeness of God, which was not religion. Therefore, to me, the Bible in essence was religion. The living reality is not a religion. So we spoke to Osho, and then Les John walked in and he said, look, Jesus is going to come just now through the portal. When he comes, call me. So I says, okay, what are you talking about? So anyway, he says, okay, that's fascinating. Jesus is going to come. So next moment, Jesus comes through the portal, and we called Leslie John. He walks in. He and Jesus is like big buddies. Then we find out that Jesus has been chatting to Leslie John for some time, been acting as his guide. And obviously I didn't know that until it revealed. So we discussed various things, and he explained what happened and so on, and he explained that he was basically locked up in a dimension. Strange enough, at that stage where he was locked up in a dimension and he had no access, that even at that stage I have not yet questioned the white light. I still accepted at a deeper level that God as the white light existed. Even at that stage I've already been speaking to reptilians. To me they were just part of this whole thing, and God had a greater purpose. All I have to do is understand it. And so here we're chatting away with Jesus. Then Jesus and Kiran, they went and they cleared up the demon dimension. So in that moment, the last demon we did was Hitler. It was the very last demon we did. After that, all the demons were cleared up. They cleared the demon dimension. Jesus, Kiran, and Hitler, Mikey. They cleared the demon dimension. They brought all the demons together. They all did forgiveness, and they all transcended, and that was it. So now there was no more demons. I mean, in one singular moment. After all the years we've dealt with it, there was no more demons.
What year was this?
You're asking me.
2003? 2004?
I'm not quite sure. We'll have to look that up.
Alright.
So I was sitting there with Chief, having coffee, and he asked me a question. He says to me, after all this, wouldn't you now trust God? And I said to him, Chief, I have to be honest with myself and say no. So I said to Sunette, go ask the white light what's going on, ask questions. I don't know which questions, just ask questions. I mean, I don't know. And then in a moment, I said, no, I must ask this myself. So I did. And I did it from a different perspective. I simply became it. And that in that moment, the white light and everything was no more. Obviously, I never even spoke to the angels because I was so pissed off with them for allowing the demons to exist and not applying forgiveness that invalidated already their existence. Any master, any great guru, whatever, just on that singular point, may invalidated their total message of love, because the greatest tool they had, which was forgiveness, they didn't use, while we have proven on earth, using forgiveness, that transcends all things.
When did you get to that point? Was it before the demons were taken out? That the angels had invalidated their existence?
No, I didn't know. I did not question that directly. I simply disregarded it because, from my perspective, I was standing within the principle of forgiveness as the teaching that is here to support all of life.
Angels are just a short, or just an extension of God. Did you
I didn't. I wanted to hear from God Himself, the white light. I mean, that's what I wanted to hear. And in that moment, when that happened, there was no more angels. I then obviously did not realize everything that was really going on and what has been happening, what happened in 1998, and I didn't realize all the things that was going on. That came out as we investigated. As we investigated, we started to realize that, man, there's a lot more than what meets the eye. And for a year and a half, we just investigated before we said anything. But I mean, at that stage, we have for several years already proven one simple fact, that forgiveness transcends all things. That is the key of all keys. Forgiveness can work for a demon, it can work for any human being, equal in one. To me, the message of the demons has always been only one message: forgiveness. We realize, obviously, in heaven it was simplistic, on the demon dimension it was simplistic to help millions of demons, because there is quantum time. On earth it was a different story. You can't do that. Here we are in time. Here each one will have to do it for themselves. Here each one will have to apply forgiveness for themselves. The bottom line was how to bring this message across in an understandable way that makes sense and that will support people to realize that, after all, we are responsible for ourselves.